Oops. Oh, that doesn't smell nice. Right, hello there ladies and gents, welcome to another repair video. Today we're going to be looking at this PlayStation 4 Slim, which has been sent in. And this particular console has been sent by the company that sends me a rather lot of consoles. This particular console basically says that it's got no power, and then in brackets it says water damage. So this one is going to be a rather interesting one, and the reason for that is because the company that sends these has already checked the power supply, and obviously that made no difference. So what they do is they'll check the basic things. So for example, with this particular one, as you can see, it does say power supply replacement because that's what it was booked in as. And then, you know, they'll just write in send when it needs to come to me or whatever. So basically, it comes up PS4 Slim, internal power supply replacement. So they've already checked a new power supply, and it's obviously not that, because if it was, then they would have fixed it themselves. But it's not the power supply, so I'm going to rule that out straight away, because, like I said, it's already been checked with a brand new power supply, and we still have the same issue. So what I'm going to do is, like always, I'm going to attempt to turn it on. So I'm going to pop in some power. And I'm going to give it a couple of seconds, because PS4s always take a few seconds before they'll actually turn on. And then I'm going to attempt to turn it on. Okay, so no response from the power supply, from the power button. And also no response from the power button, the eject button as well. One thing I do want to try before I actually go ahead and open it up is I just want to try and pop a disc in. So I'm going to try and pop a disc into here and see if it turns on with the disc drive. Very unlikely, they've probably already tried that, but let's try it anyway. And there's a disc in here, so I'm not going to be able to do that. Okay, that's fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to open this up, I'm going to take a look and see if I can figure out what's wrong and see if we can get this console working again. So before we actually go ahead and open this up, I just want to give a massive shout out to my mate Vince. So if you don't know who my mate Vince is, he is a trying to fix channel where he attempts to repair, you know, all sorts of electronic devices. And today he posted a video where he gave me a bit of a shout out, and that shout out is actually led so far to over 200 new subscribers. So a massive thank you to my mate Vince for that. I really appreciate it. It certainly helps the channel to grow, and it's getting me closer to that 5,000 sub goal by the end of the year. So big thank you to my mate Vince. I'll leave his information in the video description. Be sure to go check him out, give him a follow, show him some love. He makes it clear in all of his videos that he's not a professional and that he doesn't really know what he's doing, but he makes some really good content, and most of the time he does actually manage to fix them. So for someone who quote doesn't know what he's doing, he's actually pretty good. And yeah, you should definitely go and check him out. He's a really good, nice, kind guy, and I just really like his content. I was actually watching him before I was doing this sort of stuff. Oh wow, that's a lot of damage. Okay, so straight away I can see a lot of water damage, a lot of corrosion around the power button, interestingly enough. But yeah, you should really go and check him out and show him some love, and subscribe to his channel. Right, so we've got some very obvious damage here around the fan connector and around the power button area. So that's going to be one reason it's not turning on. So we're going to have to look at that before we go any further with this. Okay, so it looks like the brunt of damage is on this side of the board. We've got a little bit of liquid damage just here, very minute, but it looks like most of it has gone on the fan connector here and the power connector just here. So let's take a look under the microscope and we'll see the extent of it a little bit clearer. Okay, so here's the power connector then. So the power connector has definitely, sorry, not the power connector, the power button connector. So the power button connector has definitely seen better days, hasn't it? We've got a very minute amount of corrosion just here. Very small. It's barely visible, but you can just about see it just around here. That's not really that much to be concerned about. I mean, there's one resistor there, so that should clean right up. Probably got to change this connector. We might get away with just resoldering them joints, and that might be enough. But then this fan connector as well, you can see the damage to the fan connector. There's quite a lot of damage there. And that looks absolutely disgusting. So those joints are definitely not going to be making a very good connection. But yeah, overall, not a lot of damage at all to this. So let's just see if we can just... Yeah, look at that. I've got a feeling that this fan connector is not going to work. I'll tell you what we can do. Let's come out of the microscope cam for a minute. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean up some of this area with some isopropyl alcohol. So we've got the power connector here. We've got a little bit of corrosion just here as well, so let's check that out. This chip here, I believe, is related to the disk drive. However, if the disk drive doesn't work afterwards, we can look into it, and that's probably one of the reasons why. What I'm going to do is just a bit of isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush. Just give this connector a nice clean and try and get it on the inside as well. Just try and clean up any corrosion that might be there. So it looks like all of the liquid stayed around this area here, which is good, because it can't have done that much damage realistically if it stayed around there. Like I said, there is this fan connector. Like I said, the fan is the last thing that I'm going to be worried about, because if the console doesn't work, then the fan's not going to work anyway, so I'm not concerned about that too much. I will clean it up, but I'm not going to change that fan connector unless I get the console working, because it's just a waste of time. That's like changing a light bulb when you've got no electricity. It's just pointless. So yeah, let's just give it a clean. Give it a nice good scrub there, and I can already see some damage to that area. So we'll probably need to, like I said, replace that connector and maybe run some jumper wires for that. But we'll see. Right, so now we've got the corrosion off, let's just take a look under the scope. Okay, so we can clearly see here that we've got some damage to one of these pins here. So what we can do is, let's just check. This is probably just going to push away from the trace when I start messing with it. Yeah, so that's, looks like that's completely, maybe completely taken the trace. That's definitely going to need sorting out. Probably going to need a new connector as well. Looks like it's gone rusty. Let's take a look at this here. Okay, yeah, this is going to need, this connector here is going to need changing, so I'm going to need to get a connector off of a donor board, I think, and replace this connector. Okay, so I'm going to use my heat gun and just dry this isopropyl alcohol up so I can see properly. There we go. Right, so let's zoom in then. Yeah, so we've got several pins there which are pretty severely damaged. Right, let's just see how strong these are. Yep, those traces are gone. Same with that one, and same with that one. In fact, none of them are very strong. Okay. Right, so what I'm going to do then, I'm going to get this connector removed. So let's come out of the microscope cam, because we're not going to be able to do this under the microscope. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hang the board over the side of the table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my heat gun, and I'm going to heat up from the bottom of the board. So the reason I'm hanging it over the table is so as I can heat up from the bottom of the board. And I'm just going to give this a few minutes just to basically melt the solder on the top. And by doing that, we're not going to risk damaging any other connectors by using heat around it. So let's add some flux. Okay. So that connector's off now then. So let's go back under the microscope and see what we're dealing with. Okay, so I'll just clean that up with IPA there. Okay, that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. So, if we take a look then at these traces here, we've got these pads here which all look fine. So these pads here are fine, and then we've got a missing pad here, and we've got a missing pad just here. So this pad here goes up to here, this via here, and that one might not actually be missing. I might be able to salvage that. But this pad here is completely missing, and that goes to this trace here. So what we need to do before we can actually put a new connector on this is we need to run a couple of jumper wires. So I'm going to turn my soldering iron on, and I'm just going to add a little bit of flux to the area. So I'm going to clean up these traces first before I go ahead and start running jumper wires. So let's just zoom out so you guys can see. There we go. That should be nice and clear now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace all of this solder with some leaded solder, and that's going to lower the melting temperature on those pads when we go to put a new connector on. And it's going to help us to put a new connector on without damaging any more components around the area. These pads are not too bad anyway, but if we can lower the melting temperature a little bit more and lower that risk, then that's better. So let's just replace all of these. So I'm just going to drag around with a circular motion. And as you can see, this pad that we originally thought was missing appears to have just magically come back. Good. That's excellent. So we still need to run one jumper. Now, because we've got to put a connector on the top here, this is going to be rather difficult to run a jumper, because the jumper is off to the side, or the trace is off to the side rather. So it's going to be rather difficult to run a jumper there. So what I'm going to do, if I just move a bit of this flux out the way you can see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a little bit of a scrape using some tweezers. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to put some fresh solder on that pad, just to tin the pad, so when we go to drop a new connector on it, it's ready for it. So let's take the soldering iron with some fresh leaded solder. Just like that. I'm just going to solder that to there. And then I'm just going to leave that jumper wire hanging down. And the reason I'm going to do that is because that's going to allow me to solder that jumper wire manually once we've done with the rest of it. So I'm going to find a donor board now that's got that particular connector on. Okay, so here's a lovely donor board. So let's get this connector off here, and we'll get it onto the other board. So again, I'm going to use the same method. I'm going to heat up from the bottom. Okay, so that one came off a little bit more tricky. It didn't want to come off the board there. I'm going to pop that board to one side for a minute because I'm probably going to need it again for the fan connector. So what I'm going to do then now is I'm just going to pop this in position. So I'm going to use the microscope to get it in position actually. Right, okay, so here's the new connector then. So what I've got to do then is I've got to get this connector onto the board. And again, like I did with the removal process, I'm going to do it from the bottom. So even though we can see it through the microscope, I'm actually heating up from the bottom, the same as the process for removing it. We're going to see it start to move around a little bit in a minute, so we're going to watch it as closely as possible. Okay, so I'm not 100% if that's actually on there or not, but I'm going to double check it anyway. So what I'm going to do, I know there's some bridges there as well, so what I'll do there is just add a bit of flux there. Okay, so we've got a bridge on one of these here. So what I'll do with that, I'll get some solder wick. I'm just going to clean these up as best I can. Okay, so I'm going to bring the board back in to the middle of the table now. Okay, so I think I might have kind of messed this up a little bit, to be honest, in that the jumper might have ended up moving. So I might have to take this off and do it all manually without using heat at all. But I'll find that out in a minute. So if this jumper is shorted to ground, then I'm going to have to do it manually. So put my multimeter into continuity mode. That's the mode that's going to beep when we complete the circuit. And I'm just going to check against a ground point. No, I don't think it is. Oh, so that jumper doesn't appear to be shorted, which is great. So because it's underneath the connector, it's rather difficult. But I'm going to do my best on it and hope that it works. So we'll add some flux there. I'm just going to try and solder this jumper onto its pad. Just like that. And that jumper should be on there now. So let's try and break it away. And then I'm just going to touch up the rest of these pins. And I have just caused a bridge again. Okay, let's clean it up and see what we're working with then. See if we've got any bridges, see if those pins are connected. Okay, let's just dry it off. Okay, so it's a little bit dark there for you guys, but it doesn't look like we've got any bridges. Oh, actually, yes it does, we've got one in the middle. Okay, so let's clean that up then. Okay, that looks good. So all of those pins appear to be connected. Let's just give them all the good old-fashioned nudge test. And make sure. Good. 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 And good. And then finally this one appears to be connected to that jumper. So I'm going to check that jumper to make sure we don't have a short to ground by using the multimeter again in continuity mode. So I've got one probe on ground and the other probe on the jumper. And we do not. So that should be good to go. We should be good to go on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this back in the chassis now and just see if it turns on. So all I'm going to do is I'm not going to screw anything down apart from the heatsink. Just because I don't want it overheating. So I'm just going to put it back together enough for testing it. And if it obviously works, then, you know, if it works, then obviously we need to change that fan connector as well, because that is severely damaged. I mean, I don't know for sure whether it's going to work or not, but, you know, that connector is visibly damaged, so that's the reason why I'm obviously replacing that connector. Because we can't test anything until we've got a connector that works. And I'm not going to be able to use that ribbon as well, because that ribbon is visibly damaged as well. So I'm going to need to change the power button on top of that. But let's just get this screwed in first. Let's get it clamped down, make sure it doesn't overheat. I haven't changed the thermal paste yet, but again, there's no point if it doesn't work, because it's like, you know, it's like changing a light bulb in electricity. Yeah, there's just no point in doing it unless it's actually working. So if we can see that the console comes on and then it goes to a white light, then we will do everything else. We'll change that other connector and replace that thermal paste and stuff. But only then will we do that kind of stuff, because otherwise it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. So yeah. So I'm going to pop the power supply in. And I'm going to flip it upside down so as it's facing the right way for us. Pop the power connector in there, or the power lead rather. And I'm going to pop the hard drive in. Again, like I say, I'm not going to plug anything in, just the hard drive and the power supply and the power button. That's all I'm plugging in. I'm not plugging anything in that doesn't need plugging in. I'm going to use my own ribbon because I know that's a good ribbon and I know it's not burnt up and things. I'm going to use my own ribbon, but I'm going to use the power supply, the power button that's already here. Okay, there we go. Let's connect the fan anyway, because why not? Let's actually connect the disk drive as well, so we can see if we can pop a disk in and things. So this is more than enough just to test it. Okay, there we go. So let's try and turn it on. Flip it around. We have a blue light. So we have no fan spin. But we do have a blue light. But the reason we don't have a fan spin is because that power connector is knackered. We have a white light. That's brilliant. Right, let's see if we get a display. That's fantastic news. Awesome. Right, so let's plug in HDMI lead. Okay, so obviously we're going to need to change that power connector, that fan connector as well. Right, so I'm going to switch over to my capture card now. There we go, ladies and gents. That's fantastic news. Right, so I'm going to turn this off. That's all I need to see for now. We don't have a fan, obviously, so I don't want to keep this console on too long. But that is absolutely brilliant news. So we are going to need to change that fan connector, but other than that, this console appears to be done. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do now then is I'm going to need to take it apart once again, just so we can get this fan connector changed, because obviously if we don't change the fan connector, then we're not going to have any cooling on the system, and it's just going to overheat within, you know, 5 minutes of being turned on, and we don't want that. So we'll get the fan connector changed as well, and then we'll do a full test on it, and all being well, it all works. But we do get a display, it does turn on, so you know, hopefully we've got no more damage. But I'm going to say that this is probably fully working, apart from that fan. So fingers crossed we can get the fan working. Hopefully it hasn't caused too much damage to the fan circuit itself, because to be honest, I've never even diagnosed the fan circuit on these. So you know, I've never changed the connector, I've never diagnosed the circuit, so you know, I probably wouldn't know where to start on that. But this is certainly an interesting one, because we don't usually get water damage on a PS4. So just, you know, it'd be interesting to find out exactly how this happened, because the design of these, they're designed to prevent water damage, or in so many words, you know, like it's not really a common problem with these consoles as it is on the Xbox. But never mind. Right, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go back over to the edge of the table again, and I'm going to remove the fan connector this time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a fan connector off another donor board again, and we'll get this fan connector changed. I'll see what the condition is underneath, but we should be alright with this. Worst case scenario, we'll have to run a jumper, but you know, it's not too bad. So I do want to be careful with this, because I don't want to be lifting it up. Ah, damn it. I forgot to take the battery out. Be careful with this, because I don't want to be lifting it up. Oops. Oh, that doesn't smell nice. Whoops. Okay, I'm going to have to replace the battery as well. Oh, that stinks. I've never done that before, I swear to God, I've never done that before. Oh dear. Oh wow. Right, okay, I'm going to end up damaging this fan connector, I think. This battery connector. Let's get this connector off. It doesn't really matter if I damage this connector actually, so it doesn't really matter if I damage the connector, because I'm going to change it. So what I'll do, I'll just do it from the top, rather than risk damaging that battery connector as well. Right, there we go. So that connector's off then. And I also burnt myself in the process on the soldering iron. So yeah, there is that. So I've just destroyed another coat, jacket, whatever you want to call it. Oh dear, never mind. So let's take a look at this connector then, shall we? or rather the pads for the connector. Right, so it looks like we've completely lost the trace where the wire connects to it. So where it goes through to the other side of the board is completely gone. So probably going to need to run a jumper from the other side of the board, because that's not going to make a connection. Let's take a look on the other side. Oh, okay, so it does come through here. So let's just see if I can expose some of this. Right, so I think what I'm going to have to do with this is probably run a jumper from this side of the board and wrap it around. So if we just zoom in on this here, you'll see I've just scraped away at a little bit of this wire here. But the problem is I don't think I'm going to get any... I don't think I'm going to be able to get a wire through the wire. So that could be a problem. Okay, so let's just clean that up then. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at this then. Yeah, so that wire is completely and utterly gone. So that's going to be a little bit of a problem. Right, let me see if I'm going to see if I can actually push a jumper wire through there. I'm not sure if I can though, to be honest. Well, I wonder if that's gone through. Ah, there we go. Okay, I can work with that. Alright, so that's pushed through. That's brilliant news. So, what I can do then is, if I take the soldering iron, let's get some flux on there first. So pop a bit of flux there. And then what I'm going to do is just solder this here. Just recreate that wire there. So by threading that through there, that's going to be a really nice, strong, safe connection. So we're not going to need to run any jumper wire around the edge of the board. I'm quite lucky there where I've managed to get that in. So let's clean that up. Excellent. Beautiful. Okay, so let's just dry that off. And there we go, you see. So that is a perfect connection there. And then back over on the other side of the board, we've got a really nice, strong connection there to that wire. So let's just clean this up. And then just to complete that connection, just going to scrape away at that. Pop some flux there. And then I'm just going to solder that jumper wire to this side of the board. Just like that. Beautiful. So that's just restored that pad. So now we haven't got to worry that we've got a missing trace, because even though the trace was there, even though the pad was there, the trace wasn't. So by running that very minute jumper wire there straight through the board, that's restored that pad. Beautiful. Okay, so next I need to take a new connector, or rather a donor connector. So I'm going to remove the battery this time, and we can use that battery on the board we're working on as well. And then I'm just going to remove this connector from the board. But this time I'm doing it from the bottom because I don't want to destroy the connector. So I'm not bothered about destroying anything on the other side of the board on this one because it's a donor board. Right, okay, so let's get this replacement connector in place. And what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to push down on the connector and try and solder these pins in. So it might be a little bit difficult to see, but I basically just need to get this as flush to the board as I possibly can. So I'm basically just going to be pressing down on the connector and just going across each pad. And then we'll try and do the ground ones as well. I'll use the heat gun if I have to, but I want to try and avoid that as much as possible. I'm going to need to do these side pads though to add the strength back to it. Right, okay, I think I'm going to need to use some heat from underneath, so I'll do that. Okay, so let's get the heat gun then, and let's try and get this on. So it should melt a lot quicker now because we've got leaded solder on here. Okay, so I'll have a look at that under the scope. But that should be connected. Let's add some flux now then. And hopefully we haven't damaged that battery connector anymore. Hopefully. It's what I like to call an occupational hazard. Collateral damage. Okay, I'm going to get some solder. Just add a little bit of strength to this. This side might be a little bit tricky, but I'll give it a go. So these are just ground pads, so it doesn't really matter too much if I end up getting a bit of solder on the side. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, so now I need to replace this component what was damaged from just here. I'm going to say that's probably a capacitor, so I'll take a look. I've just caused a bridge there as well. I'll take a look, and if it's just a tiny little cap, I'm not going to bother replacing it because I don't want to risk damaging the connector. So if it's just a small cap, then there's no point at all in replacing it because it's not going to make much of a difference whether it's there or not. But if it's some sort of resistor or something, then obviously we'll need to replace it. So I just cleaned up some of this excess solder what overflowed onto the ground plane. Here is the same area on a donor board, and that is indeed just a tiny little cap. So this cap here isn't going to make any difference at all to the operation of the fan. So I'm not going to bother replacing that and risking damaging that area of the board or damaging that connector. It's not going to make any difference whatsoever. As we can see here, we've got what I assume is the power end, the power side, and then we've got the cap here, and then that's connected to this one which is ground. So that's how I know for sure that that's a capacitor and not a resistor, because resistors are never connected to ground. So yeah, it's not going to make much of a difference whether that cap's there or not. So I'm just going to basically leave that, and as you can see there's another one what's meant to be on the other pin on the other pad, but there's nothing there, so it's obviously an optional component. I'm not going to replace that. I'm not going to bother. It's just not worth risking damaging the board anymore by putting that there, and it's very, very small, and the chances of melting the connector in the process are fairly high, so we're going to leave that. Okay, so I think we're pretty much ready to get this tested now. So not too much damage to that battery connector. We should still be able to get a battery in there absolutely fine. Yep, no problem at all with that. So we don't need to replace that battery connector either. Right, so pretty much ready for testing. So what I'm going to do is, before we go any further, I'm going to clean up the thermal paste that's on here already. And I'm going to apply some fresh thermal paste. But I'm going to clean up the rest of the console first, make sure that we've got no dust inside the fan. Make sure that it's not going to overheat for any reason when we put it back together. The fan should be working now. Like I said, that capacitor is not going to make any difference at all to the operation of the fan, so I'm not worried about that whatsoever. Spin it around. Let's take my HDMI lead. I'm going to switch over to the capture card as well. Let's turn it on. And there we go. So that fan is spinning absolutely fine. So it sounds like we do have a disc in here. There we go. FIFA 18. Excellent. Okay, and there is the display. Brilliant. So I'll just give this a really quick test. Make sure that the disk drive is working. Make sure we can connect to Wi-Fi. Make sure we've got 1080p display. And then we'll obviously put it back together and call this job done. Because this looks like it's fixed. So there's the PlayStation logo. And the fan is spinning perfectly now. I'm going to pop a USB in. We also have controller sync. There we go. Awesome. Right, so let's go ahead and go to settings. No, we don't want that. Okay, yeah, let's ignore that for now. Sound and screen. We have 1080p, which is great. So let's check the network. Connect to my open network, so if you know where I live you get free Wi-Fi. But yeah, feel free to connect, I don't care. Might struggle to connect to this Wi-Fi connection. I'm going to disconnect that, make sure it works on wireless, and it does. We've still got connection there on the controller, so wireless connection for the controller's working. I think I'm going to need to connect to a different network because that one's up in the house and it's a little bit far away. And test internet. So let's double check, make sure we can sign in. I mean, it might not sign in because it has just come up that it needs, yeah, system software update, so that's fine. Not really worried about that, of course. It is not my job to update it, just for the record, because the customer might not want it updating. So if I can help it, I don't update it. So yeah, it's on 6.51. This is not going to be updated. Right, FIFA 18, excellent. So that is working. Let's just make sure that we can. Yeah, okay. So this console is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut this down. And we're going to get it put back together. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to put all the rest of this back together now. And then we're going to call this done and everyone is going to be happy. Especially me. So what I need to do is just pop these thermal pads back on. Right, and that, ladies and gents, is pretty much it. So let's just turn it on one final time and make sure that it turns on. Because we don't want to put it back together and then not test it. You know, anything could happen during that time. I have put them back together before and then they've just suddenly died, so I always test them one last time before I call the job done. But that is turning on, of course, and it should be loading up the PlayStation logo. There we go. And yeah, that's that. So I'm pretty happy with that. Not a bad repair at all. Like I said, it's very unusual to see water damage on a PS4, and you know, I mean, I can imagine that the water has just piled up inside the bottom of the chassis, and that's what caused it to, you know, hit the motherboard itself. But it's not very often that we actually see that. Let's just check on this disk drive, because I didn't like the sound of that then. I wasn't too keen on the sound of that disk drive then. Have I left something unplugged? Maybe? Right, okay then, ladies and gents, so it's the next day now, and unfortunately last night my camera stopped recording because my battery went below 5%. So unfortunately I missed out on about 5 minutes of footage, but it's not too much of a big deal because I didn't actually do anything else apart from just have a look and see what the situation was with the disk drive. So I took the bottom off and unplugged the disk drive and plugged it back in to make sure that it wasn't something I'd done with the ribbons. But unfortunately it didn't solve the problem, so there's something wrong with the disk drive and I don't know what. Now the disk drive was working fine when I tested it the first time, so what's actually wrong with it? I don't know. Could it have just died because of liquid damage? Maybe. It might just be the laser, but I really don't know. It was working as you saw on the video, and then all of a sudden I've put it back together and it's died, and this is the exact reason why I test after everything's been put back together. It's kind of annoying, but it is what it is. I mean, if the disk drive's just died because of liquid damage, then so be it. You know, there's nothing really we can do. But what I'm doing there is just making sure that everything's plugged in absolutely correctly, and basically just going to test it again, sort of thing. But I don't actually know what's going on with it, unfortunately. But if it needs a new laser, it needs a new laser. That's just one of them things. Right, so that's definitely plugged in properly then now. So let's turn it on. It's on standby now. Okay, so we should be picking up the screen in a second. There we go. Right, so let's get the controller then. That's better. Okay, so I guess it was just not plugged in properly. Maybe. So that's working now. Update later. Yeah, that's working now. So I don't know what was going on with that. Maybe it was just not plugged in properly. I don't know. I'm just going to try and eject the disc. Put it back in again. Yeah, that's working fine now. Alright. Okay, yeah, I didn't actually do anything to that to get it working again, so I don't know what was going on with that, but I'm going to call that done. I'm happy with that. I guess it was just not plugged in properly or something. There was a little bit of very slight damage to one of those ribbons, so I'll make the customer aware of that, but to be perfectly honest, the new disk drive is like £50 odd on this. This is on version 6.5, so whether the customer uses this as a modified console, I don't know. But I'm certainly not going to be updating the console because of that. So yeah, I'm going to call this one done. So I'll summarise while I'm putting the base back on. So this console was sent to me because it had liquid damage, and because of that it had no power. Upon initial inspection, I determined that there was a problem with the power button connector. So we've replaced the power button connector, and we also replaced the fan connector, and that has in fact caused it to start working again. So very minimal water damage on this, to say the least, but still water damage nonetheless. I have given it a visual inspection and the rest of the board seems absolutely fine, so I'm comfortable enough to say that this is done. If, for example, I wasn't comfortable in whether it was done or not, I wouldn't send it back, and I would obviously say no, it's a no fix or something, or it needs more time. But I'm pretty comfortable on this one that this one's going to work absolutely fine. There may be an issue with the disk drive in the future, but I will let the customer know about that. Obviously, I'm not going to be... It's weekend now. I mean, it's Sunday now. It's Sunday morning. So I'm not going to be replacing a disk drive because I can't get in touch with the company who sent this until tomorrow. But these have got to go back out tomorrow. So I'll leave a little note on the ticket that it came with to say that it was displaying some signs of issues with the disk drive. And then I'll leave it up to him whether he wants to replace that or not. Right, okay, so that's going to be it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. If you do have any comments or questions, leave them down in the comment section down below. I will always do my best to get back to you, and as always, leave a thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed the content. And if you want to see more trying to fix videos where I try and fix mainly consoles but sometimes other things too, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications so that you're notified every time that I upload. I am trying really hard to get to 5,000 subs by the end of the year, and thanks to my mate Vince, we're about 500 subs closer from yesterday, which is absolutely amazing. Like I said at the start of the video, we are going to be giving away a PS4 and a £50 gift card to 2 lucky winners when we get to 5,000 subs. So be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss that announcement video when it does come. It's going to come very soon by the looks of it. So thanks very much for watching, and until next time, see you later. Bye for now.